So first of all, what's ballot harvesting? Explain that.
So I will. And I also want to, in doing so, draw a distinction. So ballot harvesting or vote harvesting is simply the idea that you can give your ballot to someone else. We're talking here, by the way, about an absentee or mail-in ballot. You can give it to someone else to go and drop it off at a post box or a mail-in drop box. Now, ballot harvesting is allowed to certain degrees in about 26 states, but most of those states impose pretty strict limits on ballot harvesting. So there's a little bit of a spectrum. California probably has the most liberal ballot harvesting law in the country. It basically says you can give your vote to anyone and ask them to take it and drop it off. In fact, you can go down the street and start collecting the votes of people down the street, put them in the back of your car, take them down to the drop box, and that's all legal. So California, in other words, allows pretty much all kinds of ballot harvesting. Now, the 5 states that we're talking about don't do that. Very typical is both Georgia and Arizona, which say the same thing. You can give your vote, your ballot, to an immediate family member, or if you are in a facility or in a nursing home, for example, you can give it to a caregiver for them to drop off, but not to anyone else. So this is the kind, and then there are some states that prohibit harvesting altogether. You have to take your own ballot and drop it off. Nobody else can do it for you. So this is the range of the laws. But the point I want to make is that ballot harvesting is not the same as paid trafficking. So paid trafficking is when you involve money. Even in California, if I say to my neighbor, hey, Bill, you take my ballot, you go drop it off, that's allowed. But if I say to my neighbor, hey, Bill, here's $50 to go take my ballot and drop it off, that's not allowed, because the moment that money enters the process, issues of bribery, essentially you cannot contaminate the voting process by introducing payment. And so in no state is paid ballot trafficking legal.
Okay, so the name of the movie is 2000 Mules. You referenced the term in our conversation already. What is a mule for purposes of this film?
Right. So a mule, you can see the term is lifted. Catherine Engelbrecht kind of just lifted it from drug trafficking or from sex trafficking. The mule is the delivery guy, right? So in this particular context, we're talking about ballot trafficking. A mule is a paid operative who has been hired by someone. In this case, it'll turn out to be far left-wing organizations deeply embedded in the inner city. But someone hires this mule, this paid operative, to pick up and drop off illegal and fraudulent votes into a ballot drop box. I'm happy to discuss why those are illegal and fraudulent. But let's just say that the mule's the guy. He doesn't come up with his own votes. He stops by at a kind of vote stash house, as we call it. He gets the backpack or the satchel full of votes, and then he proceeds, or she proceeds, on a kind of almost mailman's route, going from one drop box to another, depositing typically relatively small number of votes in each drop box, but a large number of votes in the aggregate.
So they're not dumb. They're not going to take, hey, I got 200 votes from the nonprofit center that's been designed to promote, quote, election integrity, and I'm going to dump them all in one drop box, that for that accepts votes. They know that would look suspicious. It would be flagged, and they have to be more clever about it.
Megyn, this is why I love talking to you, because exactly, if a mule were to go empty 300 votes in a drop box, the typical number of votes in all the adjoining drop boxes is going to be, 40 or 50 votes. And suddenly you see this big spike of votes. The election official that's filling out those custody documents would immediately know something was wrong. And so the mules are sort of instructed, don't do that. Typically, they drop 3, 5, 8, or 10 ballots at a time. And this is really why they go to multiple drop boxes. And this is why actually it became relatively easy to track them, because the geotracking monitors the movement, not of you, but of your cell phone, going from one drop box to the other, to the other, to the other.
Now, you talk about geotracking. There was a story just recently, for people who may not have heard about this prior to 2000 Mules, where we found out the CDC had bought that same data to see whether people were obeying some of the quarantine impositions, some of the curfews that had been imposed. And by just getting access to cell phone data, they can find out, yes, this is people listened or they didn't listen. They went inside or they didn't go inside. And this is what they did instead. So all sorts of things can be gleaned about individuals. how specific can it get? Like, because before we get to your movie, I started thinking then, like, would they be able to know Megyn Kelly did not obey the curfew, or is it not quite that specific?
Well, let's go slowly here because you mentioned the CDC. So the CDC is using this data to try to monitor if people are social distancing. Everybody knows that social distancing means staying 6 feet apart. Now, this data would be useless to the CDC if geotracking was not accurate to within 6 feet. What good would it be if it's accurate to say 30 feet? You couldn't tell if somebody was social distancing or not. So the geotracking has become more and more accurate. It's true if you go back 10 years or you go back 15 years, just like with GPS, the GPS was not as accurate then as it is now. Now, inside of our cell phones are innumerable apps. And as it turns out, when you download those apps or you click on those apps, you are unwittingly perhaps giving permission to the people in those apps to get your data. And this is a massive industry. This data is aggregated by so-called aggregators. There are about 40 major aggregators. And unbelievably, perhaps it's sold on the open market, which is not to say that you and I can buy it at Walmart, but we can get this data if you pay for it. And the data can go back in time. So, for example, you take True the Vote. They went to the larger urban Atlanta, which encompasses 4 counties. They went to Maricopa County, Phoenix area, Detroit, Milwaukee, the greater Philadelphia area. And they said, we want the data from October 1, the beginning of the runoffs, till election day. And then in Georgia, because there was a Senate runoff, we also want the data going all the way through January 5th, which was the date of the runoff election. And
for
you
where?
can
For
buy
what?
that
Define that a little bit tighter, though, because it wasn't like for all of Maricopa County. It was more targeted than that.
Right. It was not all of Maricopa County. It was the greater Phoenix area. And by and large, to be honest, True the Vote was also limited by resources. They got a $2 million grant. They had to decide if we're going to test this hypothesis, we need to be clever and we need to sort of pick our areas. And so what they reasoned was they essentially said, look, the rules of this election have changed under the pretext of COVID. Lots of mail-in drop boxes and lots of mail-out ballots. And so we're going to sort of make a guess, make a hypothesis that if there's going to be cheating, it's going to be there. It's going to be not machine cheating, not the Chinese. It's going to be cheating where it is easier to cheat. It's almost like if the bank creates a new facility which doesn't have proper surveillance, doesn't have proper security, and the tellers are instructed, don't be too fastidious to match the signatures. Well, where do you think the bank robbers are going to go? They're going to go to that facility because it's more vulnerable to being taken advantage of. And this geotracking is used in intelligence services. It's used by law enforcement. You know, if there's a murder in a park, Megyn, and there is no physical evidence and there are no eyewitnesses, there's just a body. One of the things that law enforcement will do is they will do a geofence, which is nothing more than drawing a circle around that area, and they will look for cell phone devices in that area. And let's say there are 5 of them. Well, you get a warrant. You go to the providers who then give you the identity of those people. You go interview them. It's not to say one of them did it, but they become your 5 suspects to start.
That's amazing. I did not realize that it was at that point yet. This episode of The Megyn Kelly Show is sponsored by the Claremont Review of Books, a quarterly journal of original essays and book reviews that the smartest conservatives in America read from cover to cover. Widely regarded as the intellectual nerve center of the conservative world, the Claremont Review of Books is one of the only places where important new books and ideas are treated seriously and in depth by reviewers who know what they're talking about, many of whom you will recognize because we've had them on our show. Victor Davis Hanson, Sarab Amari, Heather McDonald, John Daniel Davidson, just to name a few. You can get a sampling of the exceptional content they publish, along with a special offer, at ClaremontReviewOfBooks.com/MK. You will receive a free bonus issue of the publication when you sign up for a 1-year subscription. That is 5 issues for the price of 4 at the cost of $19.95. If you love great writing and thoughtful insights on everything from politics to history, philosophy to music, art, sports, then sign up to start receiving the best read for the most well-read today at ClaremontReviewOfBooks.com/MK. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.